Foreign Secretary Harsh Shringla is in Sri Lanka at a time when India hopes to recalibrate its ties with its neighbor, which have been stressed lately largely because of growing Chinese influence in the island nation. So to help us understand the context of this visit, what message Mr. Shringla will carry or has carried to Sri Lanka, and what does India expect from its neighbor, we have with us Noinima Basu, who, as you know, tracks diplomacy for ThePrint. Do start sending in your questions for government matters. Noinima, so we know, and you've written about it in your story as well, how the relationship between India and Sri Lanka has been a bit strained of late. Let's first talk a little bit about that. What has happened? Why this strain in the relationship?
So, Ruhi, when this Rajapaksa regime came back to power in their, second phase of things, where former President Mahinda Rajapaksa became the Prime Minister and his brother became the President, Gotabaya Rajapaksa, there was this kind of understanding that probably there'll be a resetting of ties, because in 2019 they came to power, and that happened right after the Easter bombings that took place there, the terror attacks, and there were this, reports and certain kind of analysis coming out that India had given this intel report beforehand that, such an incident will be taking place. So when they came to power, there was this resetting of ties that had happened. In fact, Gotabaya Rajapaksa came, after assuming power, he came to India in his first foreign visit. So things looked as if there'll be a resetting of ties, because also Sri Lanka was suffering from Chinese debt, and the debt was, it was monumental. So India had also extended, and that time promised to extend line of credit, currency swap arrangements, and many other things like that. So eventually by 2020, India also was hopeful that it will be getting one of the prime projects that India was looking at. It was a government-to-government deal between India, Sri Lanka and Japan to develop the East Container Terminal in Sri Lanka port. But then we saw, as was expected, and that is what is probably dawning in India's foreign policy thinking, is also that this Rajapaksa 2.0, so to say, is also going to be, they are completely tilted towards the Chinese, and that is becoming a cause of worry. In February last year, that is in February 2020, there was this thinking going on, what will happen to the deal, and then in February 2021, the Rajapaksa government scrapped the East Container Terminal. But then we saw last month that the Adani Group, they had signed a deal for about $700 million to develop the West Container Terminal, but then this was a private deal. Sri Lanka for India assumes critical importance also because this is right there in the Indian Ocean, and with Indo-Pacific and Quad happening, India would really want ties with Sri Lanka to be, balanced out, and that's why Foreign Secretary is there to tell Sri Lanka that, okay, we understand your relationship with China, but don't maintain it at the cost of your relationship with India.
So why does India believe that that Indian projects in Sri Lanka are being executed slowly at the cost of China's projects?
So if you take into account this East Container and the West Container Terminal projects, the reason why the Rajapaksa government scrapped the ECT is because they said that, the laborer, the trade unions, they are local people, they have started criticizing that India is going to take over the Colombo port. However, we all know that, China already runs a kind of berth, a jetty in Colombo port. Apart from that, we've seen what had happened when the Rajapaksas were in power before, that the Hambantota port came under the complete Chinese control because they could not pay the debt. So it is now, China is running, and it is under Chinese control, the Hambantota port. So, but then India also has several projects running across north and south, east of west of Sri Lanka. But then those projects, no matter how much India tries, they have slowed down. Also, every little project has come under the scanner. Local people are criticizing. There's this kind of anti-India sentiment that India is taking over. However, when you see China doing or implementing such large-scale projects, nobody talks about that. There are no protests by the trade unions at that point of time. So that is the concern that India has at present.
So, Noenima, what is at the heart of Mr. Shringla's message in Sri Lanka, and what kind of meetings are scheduled? Who has he met so far? He's been there for a good 2-3 days, I think now.
Yes, so he will be coming back tomorrow. He is his trip started on 2nd of October, in which he made sure that he'll be traveling Kandy, Trincomalee, and also Jaffna. Let us also remember that this is Sri Lanka is also very crucial for India when it comes to the Tamil issue. And there's been this concern that Prime Minister Modi had raised when President Gotabaya Rajapaksa came in India, that the 13th Amendment has to be implemented and, the devolution of power. And at that time, there was some kind of commitment from the Rajapaksas that, yes, they'll be implementing it, but that has not happened. Then again, this year in February at the UN Human Council, we've seen Human Rights Council how Sri Lanka was subjected to certain kind of punitive measures for the war crimes that had happened during the Civil War, and India abstained from voting at that point of time. Basically, in a way, stating that, but then at that time also India had very strongly raised the issue at UN that the 13th Amendment has to be implemented. Right. So, although India abstained from voting along with Japan, because we did not really want to, make it look odd for Sri Lanka, because even at that time there were so many calls happening between, President Gotabaya and Prime Minister Modi. But even after all of that, we've not seen any kind of favorable environment happening for India in Sri Lanka.
Okay, so let's take this question from Omkar Darpe. Apart from the West Terminal of Colombo Port, what are the other topics on the agenda? Any grant or soft loan kind of thing?
So India has already extended a line of credit after the Rajapaksas came to power. There's been currency swap arrangements. So India has been helping Sri Lanka to sort of, answer Chinese debt. They've been also taking loans from China. And apart from that, India has several projects like the school projects. Many schools they have opened in the north and also in the east, and there are several projects, infrastructure projects, and also many kind of road and ports and other things that India is involved in. But again, the point at this kind of juncture is the fact that India is, and according to sources, that Sri Lanka is heavily tilting towards China.
Okay. Omkar has another question. Should India increase its share in the financing of projects in Sri Lanka through BIMSTEC?
Well, that's an interesting question, but we all know what's happening to BIMSTEC. When Foreign Minister Jaishankar came to power as the Foreign Minister, who was previously the Foreign Secretary, there was this trust that India will be promoting BIMSTEC more, keeping in mind the kind of supply chain and other things, trade linkages that it wants to create over the, Indian Ocean to Bay of Bengal. And that was also supposed to be wedded into the larger framework of Indo-Pacific. And that was done to bypass Pakistan and not to move the SAARC process. But eventually we've seen 3-4 years down the line that neither SAARC has moved nor has BIMSTEC now. Sri Lanka is the present chair of BIMSTEC, so they need to take a call whether they really want to move ahead with it. So they have to convene a summit meeting of the BIMSTEC leaders, only then it will move. And that is also something that Sri Lanka is sitting on and not really doing anything, because again, they don't have that kind of tacit support from China on this.
Right. Okay. This question says, there was a particular focus on Tamil culture and India's ties with the Tamil population. Was there any concern expressed over the treatment of Tamil by this government?
Yes, so as I said that issue, that the Tamilian issue is constantly cropping up in every dialogue that these governments, both the governments are having. Prime Minister Modi, as I stated, when he came to power, even in 2014, then 15, and then when the regime change happened in Sri Lanka, also the 13th constitutional amendment has been taken over, and that's what India had raised this year also, the UN Human Rights Council. So that dialogue is very much there, and that is also one of the sticking points in the relationship, I would say.
Okay, this is from Raghav. On Sunday, Gulbeen Sultana had argued in the Financial Express that the need to bolster India-Sri Lanka ties has been even more urgent due to the formation of ORCAS, although Sri Lanka is yet to offer any statement on ORCAS itself. Is that a view shared by Shringla and India in any way?
Well, not really, because for Sri Lanka it is not easy to look at AUKUS right now. Their economy is in a very bad state. We saw recently how there'd been this food crisis also had happened, but that got resolved. But then their economy is in dire straits. They have this huge Chinese debt that they had to pay up, and the fact that for Sri Lanka right now generating jobs, tourism, because after the Easter bombings, tourism had been adversely impacted, and also because of COVID. So, keeping in mind all of these factors, neither is India keen on what is happening in AUKUS, but yes, for India, it sees as a complement to Quad. But for Sri Lanka, I don't think so, and I don't think they have to give any kind of statement, because this is purely between Australia, India, US and UK. But then again, it also remains to be seen that, this is a long process for AUKUS. The first initiative is to build nuclear powered submarines, and they won't be built overnight, so it will take a lot of number of years to see, and that's an enhanced defense partnership between these three powers, and nobody really is questioning it, because end of the day everyone is aware that this is done primarily targeting China. So countries are keeping silent. They're just watching how this space sort of turns out.
Okay, this is from Jaideep Gadavi, who's a member of the Print YouTube community. Is the bitterness of ECT neutralized by the WCT?
Kind of, yes, I would say he's correct in the sense that India is now really not that upset as it was when the WCT project, the ECT and other things got scrapped, and there were these concerns whether India will at all have any presence at Colombo port or not. But then the WCT happened, and the fact that for the first time an Indian company, the Adani Group, will be present in Colombo port, and that terminal will be coming up right beside the Chinese jetty, is a big thing for India. So they'll be, India is going to watch how things are going to pan out. This is a lease for about 35 years. After that, one remains to be seen how it happens.
Right. So, Noenema, is there a bit of a, for the lack of a better word, panic that has perhaps set in to the Indian establishment, given the brazen Chinese expansion, presence in the region, whether you look at Nepal, whether you look at Sri Lanka, of course, Pakistan, and of course, there is anyway the tensions with China at the LAC?
Yeah, so this has become a huge concern in India's foreign policy altogether, that how China is now, yielding its influence in India's immediate neighborhood, and that is the reason why all the more we see India's focus now has really shifted to Indo-Pacific and Quad. So yes, when it comes to Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, I would, yes, it is there, but Bangladesh knows how to really balance it out well, and of course Pakistan, and now there's going to be Afghanistan as well. So that's the topmost challenge that India is facing at this point of time. How China is, gradually has completely expanded its influence over the entire Indian Ocean region.
Right. So is there a coherent strategy to deal with that, or is it just bilateral relationships with different countries that India is relying on?
Well, the coherent strategy is again Quad and Indo-Pacific, in which everybody is talking about the fact that not one country can, influence the region like that with military aggression, and there has to be a rule-based order. Bilaterally also, yes, India is doing as much as it can when it comes to the neighbors, but then again, as I said, that and that's the story that the print had also done, that India needs to move in certain regional frameworks like SAARC, like BIMSTEC, especially SAARC, because that is one process in which all these countries are there together. Well, Prime Minister Modi did a SAARC meeting post-COVID, I mean, in the sense for the COVID when it started, but then that process did not move, and that is again, everything boils down to the India-Pakistan tensions when it comes to the neighborhood. And now we know that China is creating a SAARC kind of subgrouping where all other, the neighboring countries of India are participating. So I believe, I think for India now the focus should be how to kickstart the process of SAARC and again start influencing that process and influence your neighbors.
Right. All right. Noenema helping us understand the key message of Foreign Secretary Harsh Shringla's visit to Sri Lanka and what India really wants to sort of convey to Sri Lanka to be able to reset ties, to be able to perhaps change the tilt that Sri Lanka has displayed towards China of late. Thank you for watching Government Matters and for sending in your questions. Do keep subscribing to our YouTube channel.